Network. Welcome to the Amamansi Network. My name is Kamau Mahakoe, and our topic this morning is barrel children. Barrel children and their impacts on the African diaspora. But I should say, though, that my experience with this phenomenon has been from the Caribbean perspective. And so I would want persons who are in other parts of the African diaspora to pitch in and let me know how has it been on your side of the fence, right? What has it been like on your side of the fence? Have you experienced that phenomenon of the barrel children, and how has it affected your space, your neck of the woods? So of course we're going to deal with some definitions so that we're all on the same page as to what we're discussing, and we're going to look at the impact it has had, right? So the term itself, barrel children, was a term that was coined by an academic of the University of the West Indies, and her name was Dr. Claudette Crawford Brown. She coined the term barrel children, and I'm going to read her actual definition of the term. So I'm reading Dr. Claudette Crawford Brown, the University of the West Indies academic. She first described the phenomenon of barrel children, and she describes barrel children as those children who, while waiting in the Caribbean to migrate to their parents in the metropolis of North America and the United Kingdom, receive material resources in the form of food and clothing in lieu of, so instead of, direct care. Dr. Crawford Brown, in her publication, Who Will Save Our Children? The Plight of the Jamaican Child in the 90s. So that's the title of her book, in which she coined the term barrel children. Who will save our children? The plight of the Jamaican child in the 90s showed that these children have surrogate parents who are often unable to give them the emotional support and nurturance that they need, and most of these children may be instead raised by grandparents or other close relatives. And we will also see in our discussion that these children are sometimes raised by siblings, older siblings, or they are raised by adults who they are not familiar with, right? They are raised by their neighbors. They are raised by other strangers in the community. All right, so let me just get back on board. Now, I'm also going to share with you as we go along. I'm also going to share with you an excerpt from one of my books, and this book is entitled Spotty Dopey, right? This book is entitled Spotty Dopey, and it has to do with how I experienced growing up, looking at what was happening to the kids around me, because I grew up in the 1980s, 1990s, right? And this phenomenon of the barrel child was very pervasive, right? Almost everyone was anticipating, once you had a relative abroad, you were anticipating to be sent for. That's the term we use. Somebody going send for you, somebody filing for you, and you're expecting to migrate. Everybody wanted to leave the islands. I grew up in Jamaica, and this was something that I'm imagining was the case in most of the other Caribbean islands, at least the English-speaking Caribbean islands, where everybody wanted to go abroad. And it was not just to go to another small island. It's not just wanting to travel on a plane. You wanted to go to big foreign, as we call it, big foreign. So I'm going to share with you now an excerpt from one of my books. Very short passage, not passage, very short chapter. Right? And so this is the cover of the book, and the title of the book is Spotty Dopey. If you're wondering, I'm not sure if, okay, so we see the cover on the screen, right? So yes, that is the young me, and this autobiography is called Spotty Dopey. It's my autobiography up to when I left high school, so that would be sixth form, right? And this chapter of the book deals with the barrel children. So I'm going to read. There was a land called Foreign, and we would actually call it in our patois Foreign, right? Foreign. There was a land called Foreign. It was a magical place where everybody who went became instantly rich and fat and spoke with a twang. For some, this twang was sporadic. This place, Foreign, smelled like Irish spring soap, because that's how the people smelled when they came back to visit. And that's how the children in the grips, that's how the clothes in the grips that they traveled with smelled. The way a brand new baby smelled when its mother took it home for the first time. Foreign was where the planes went. For quite some time, Andrea thought that America, Canada, and England were, like was said of heaven, places suspended in the sky. Tulsi had relatives who had long ago migrated to America, which Tulsi called Merca. Tulsi had applied for a visa to visit her relatives in Merca more times than she cared to admit, and had been denied each time. She kept trying, but grew increasingly frustrated, and the relatives perhaps grew tired of writing invitation letters. There were one or two children in the village of whom it was said, "Him father soon send for him," or their mother filing for them, meaning they were gearing up to be shipped off to Foreign at any moment, and you'd better not say anything to stir their wrath, or else, since they were so much better off than you. Hello. These barrel children exhibited a peculiar feistiness and tendency towards scorn, a condescension that could not go unnoticed. Their parents, some of whom had run off illegally and couldn't come back, assuming they even wanted to, or faced deportation, sent barrels of clothes, shoes, toys, and stationery in exchange for their physical presence in the child's life. Once in a while, there was a letter, or the child was taken to the phone box near to the police station to make a very long distance call. The parents would perk up and be on their best behavior and implore the children to do the same. They inquired about school and whether they were giving grandma or auntie any trouble. Behave yourself and be good. Soon send for you. They took the opportunity to explain any glitches that had been stalling the filing process and promised that they, if not the papers, would soon come through. 8 years out of 10, or sorry, 8 times out of 10, it did not come to pass. The children pined away in a miserable limbo, non-committant to school, gradually relinquishing their sense of superiority over the other ragged, barefooted Jamaican citizens who kept urging them to come play dolly house and suck and pull as the years went by, relinquished their claim on foreign. Tory and his sister Gigi eventually migrated to separate sides of the Atlantic, Tory to America and Gigi to England, to separate parents. So that ended the lovely set of 64 markers that Andrea occasionally got to borrow and draw with. Dottie too was eventually adopted by a more well-off relative who lived in Belvedere and migrated sometime after. Whether the adoption was legal or symbolic, or whether the folks were really her relatives or not, the children did not know for sure. The information that leaked down to them over bush during the dolly house was very sketchy. Someone had cocked their ears while their parents spoke one evening and had gathered a little this and that, and someone else had heard their mother say something to the effect that Dottie soon gone up, the lady taking care of her real nice, sending her to big school off the hill. Dole wasn't giving her no care at all. So they put 2 and 2 together, as children often had to do, since they were deprived of all the really crucial information of this world. One thing they knew for sure was that Dottie was no longer among them, and all they had were the memories of her hiding from her father, walking on tippy toes, and the time when she got lost and had to be taken home in a police car. This incident had been fodder for jokes for many years to come, after her face had become but a faint image in their minds. Yes, the children longed to go to the enchanted place, but they were nowhere as foreign-minded as the grown-ups. The adults in the community tried all manner of antics and went to great lengths to go to foreign. They forged papers, they got married to people that they did not know, let alone love. They made several trips to the United States Embassy and came back with shoulders drooped and head hung low, cursing Uncle Sam. A few of the men got to participate in the farm work program, sent back photographs of themselves swaddled in 200 pounds of winter apparel amid a backdrop of snow and frost. After 6 months, they came back with a twang, bearing the distinctive foreign smell and brandishing delicacies such as Pringles potato chips, peanut butter, and everybody's favorite Irish Spring soap. They put together little parcels that they distributed throughout the village as a token of the fact that they had touched the ground of the promised land. And there were some who went to foreign and came back in a wooden box to be placed 6 feet under, a dream deferred. Some of these had gotten caught up in drugs and the related crime and violence, their quest for greener pastures having backfired, snuffing each other out in their haste. One such had been Cousin Bernard, whose face Andrea only vaguely remembered, and the fact that he could dance so well. So well. All right, so this chapter 9 in my autobiography, Spotty Dopey. And if you want to read my life story, I have 2 autobiographies. This particular one takes it up to the end of my high school years. There are 28 books, and they're all available on Amazon.com. So go on over, show a sister some love, show me some love. Go on over to Amazon.com visit my author page and you can purchase this as well as any of my other 28 books. So let's get into the topic some more, right? So that chapter really summed up the barrel children phenomenon, right? As we said, Dr. Claudette Crawford Brown first coined the term barrel children. And the phenomenon is one that lends itself easily to the latchkey children. So the barrel children often resulted in what are called latchkey children, which is something that I also want to do. One of these weeks, we're going to do a video on the latchkey child and the impact of that, right? So these barrel children, and I'll tell you later in this video, we're also going to see that we also have some barrel adults, right? Some barrel adults. I am coining that term. To my knowledge, no one else has come up with that term, but it's something I have observed where not only children are waiting to be filed for, not only children are waiting to migrate, but you have some adults who have relatives abroad who are filing for them, and they too exhibit some characteristics peculiar to that situation. I have noticed it in some of the adults who are waiting to be filed for. They are non-committant. They tend to be users and abusers. They tend not to want to advance themselves. We're going to talk about that a little later in this program. So the barrel children, they tend to live in a kind of limbo, right? They tend to live in a kind of limbo where they're just cruising through life, waiting for something grand to happen. And this grand thing that they're waiting for can take years. It can literally take their entire childhood. When someone is in the United States of America or Canada or England, which are the United Kingdom, which are the main places that persons migrate to from the Caribbean, the process, the filing process can literally take the entire childhood of these. It can consume the entire childhood, and these children are waiting in limbo. Their lives are on hold. They exhibit particular features, which I'm about to describe for you. So let's first talk about why these adults leave. Why are these parents leaving the Caribbean? As I said, when I grew up in the 80s, 90s, it was even more rampant. And we're seeing the effects of that now, right? Because it's a generational thing. You see the effects in the generations that follow. When I look on Facebook now and other social media where girls I went to an all-girl high school. Most of the girls whom I went to high school with, when I check their Facebook status and I see their posts, they are living abroad. Most of the kids that I went to even primary, all-age school with, migrated because it was such a deep-rooted thing. It was drilled into you that you had to go to foreign. You must go to foreign by the hook or the crook or the book or the joke or some kind of way. You had to find yourself too big foreign because that was the land of opportunity. You had to go to either the United States of America or Canada or England, the United Kingdom. And it was so deep-rooted that it's like it propelled most persons. I hate to say, but most persons in my generation were very foreign-minded. Very foreign-minded. So they tended to go off by whatever means they could go, and many of them run off. It's a term that we use here in Jamaica. You run off. That means you may have gone by legitimate means, you may have gotten there by legitimate means, but once having got there, you make the decision, or maybe you decided even before you went that this was going to be your route to go there and stay there. I remember watching a comedic skit about foreign, and the lady, she looked at her visa, and the immigration officer was explaining to her, this is a one entry or something like that. It was a visiting visa, right? And she was saying, well, I just need to enter foreign one single time, because in her mind, that's all she needs is to get there. She has no intention of going back. So these people run off, they go up with a visiting visa, and they have no intention of returning, or they go on a farm work situation. So we have a farm work program between Jamaica and the United States or Canada, where these farm workers go up and they pick apples or they whatever for 6 months, and they're supposed to return. Some of them don't. So the burial children are really a group of abandoned. A lot of them have literally been abandoned by their parents. And in the minds of these parents, they are going to seek better opportunity. They are going to find more lucrative employment. And they're going to send back money. They're going to send back things and eventually send back for the child, right? They don't understand the length of time that this process can take for them to complete the filing, legitimize themselves, and get themselves in a position where they can reach back and bring the child up. So I guess the first set of, migration has always been, migration is a human phenomenon. It's a human tendency, right? So it's not like this is a new thing to the Caribbean, but the migration of Caribbean citizens, especially, I can speak for the English-speaking Caribbean because that has been my experience. I'm from Jamaica, and so we had, I guess it started with the Windrush generation in the 1940s, where thousands of Caribbean immigrants went on board the Windrush. So the Windrush was a ship, right? A British ship, the HMT Empire Windrush. This was 1948. That was the first trip, taking Jamaican immigrants on Trinidad and other British West Indian colonies. Immigrants from British West Indian colonies to England. And that started the mass migration. Eventually, it was no longer the ships, but it was the airplanes, a few stowaways along the way, right, in boats, but for the most part. And these were the first persons to go. And they went seeking better opportunities, right? Seeking better jobs, seeking more opportunities for advancement. And I guess in most of their minds, they're doing a good thing. This is for the ultimate good of themselves, their families, their children, and probably not even anticipating the impact, the negative impact, because overwhelmingly the impact has been negative. Overwhelmingly on the children, the impact has been negative. There are positive impacts. There is when your parents go to pave the way for you to get better opportunities for themselves and ultimately you, yes, there are positives. Some of the filing comes through very quickly, and the child can get to join the parents, the child can get to go to better schools, the child can actually be raised in a more cohesive family there. So for those for whom it does work out well, all the better for them, right? The filing process maybe takes a year, 2 years, and they join the parents, they are reunited, they get access to the opportunities that are there in these first world countries, albeit these countries were built on the labor, on the backs of these very third world immigrants. That's another story, right? So it does have some positives to it, but overwhelmingly, especially the emotional impact on the children, on these barrel children, the overwhelming impact has been negative. So what is the barrel? This barrel that we're talking about, right? So the barrel, originally, the barrels were cardboard based, so these huge barrels, right? And this is something you would go into the yard, you would see these barrels, and you would know that this person has a relative abroad who sends stuff for them. Nowadays, I'm noticing the barrels are more plastic based, right? But anywhere from 10 to 55 gallon, that's the size. Most of them 55-gallon barrels. And these barrels are loaded with material things. One of the things that you always saw was the Irish Spring soap. You remember the smell. It's always like every barrel that comes will have the Irish Spring soap. And you'll have other things, rice and flour, the staples, other material things, clothes, name brand sneakers, name brand clothes, school items. I remember when I was in high school, I used to look at these girls who they had relatives abroad, and the relatives would send their trapper keeper folders and these fancy notebooks and their markers. I remember I had this brother and sister, and they were mentioned in the passage in Spotted Opie, right? Tori and Gigi, and their parents were abroad. One parent lived in the United States, the other lived in England. And they would send these packs of markers, 64 markers, and I was totally blown away. I used to borrow the markers because I was very artistic. And I mean, you just look at these kids with all these pretty things that they have. They had the Cabbage Patch dolls and the Barbie dolls and the knapsacks and these fancy trapper keepers. Oh my, and you wanted them, but these were some of the perks, right, that these kids got. Now, when you were a child and you're looking at these other kids, you in your mind, you're not thinking, oh, well, I have my parents here. These kids don't have their parents. Yes, they have these fancy stuff, these pretty stuff, these name brand stuff, but they're not getting that affection. They're not getting that parental guidance. You're not thinking about that. The fact that you have your parents who come home to you every day, you have that love, you have that guidance right there, and then you're not thinking about that. You just looking at the other stuff and say, oh, how nice, how pretty. Not that I was never an envious person, but it just, they really looked nice, right? The toys, as well as cash remittances. This is a big part of the migration phenomenon. In the Caribbean region, this is another positive. A lot of the building that is done, a lot of the things that get done in the Caribbean household is done because of the cash remittances that are sent back by these parents who go off, right? So they do make a solid contribution. But remember, now we're talking about the impact on the child, the Caribbean child, right? So they are the envy of a lot of other children. And you see, in order to those parents who are conscious of their absence and the impact it could cause, they themselves can go through depression at times. They themselves might feel, boy, I'm abandoning my child. And in order to appease their conscience, sometimes they even do more. They will send more money. Anything the child wants. Once the child mentions it, the child gets it. Any material thing, they will send it. just to appease themselves, appease their conscience, to say, okay, I'm not there, but I'm making sure that all the needs are met, at least the financial needs, the material needs, right? And those are the parents who have a conscience, but you have some who are quite okay with the fact that they're not there. They would not have it any other way, because this gives them the freedom to go now and party down the place, do them, to do them. And what we have is a lot of these kids were raised by their grandmas, they were raised by their aunties, they were raised by strangers, neighbors, older siblings. And they did not develop that bond with their parents. So even when the filing does eventually come through and they go up to their parents, there is a gap. There is a disconnect. And a lot of them go up and eventually start misbehaving. They start going against the system there. The culture shock is great. There is no bond with their parents. There is no respect for the authority of those parents, because they were not raised by these parents. And one of the things, this is what we're going to look at next week. Next week, we're going to look at the grandma, the new grandma, today's grandma, and the fact that she's not putting up with the crap that the grandmas of the grandmas of yesterday put up with. A lot of these grandmas raise their grandchildren. The modern grandma is putting her foot down. That's what we're going to look at next week. Today's grandma is not putting up with the foolishness, right? So a lot of the kids were raised by their grandparents. They were raised by their siblings. They have no emotional connection, or very little emotional connection, with their actual biological parents. So when they do reunite with them, some of them, they have not seen them in 10 years, in 15 years. Because if they run off, they're not going to be able to return to the island until they get their papers straightened out, which can take 5, 10, 15 years. So yes, they might send pictures, they might make phone calls, and nowadays it's even more convenient in terms of that. They can FaceTime, yes, they can do that, but there's nothing like that face-to-face direct interaction, that mother's touch, that father's touch, that voice, that strong voice, that presence, right? That presence. It's just not the same. It's just not the same. And there is that gap. There definitely is that gap, which is very difficult to bridge. So now we're going to look at the impact, some of the behavioral impacts this has on the child. You see, one of the things you pick up as a child, one of the things I picked up, and if I was not strong in myself, I am sure I would have been even more impacted by this, right? When you see your parents constantly talking about foreign, that other place, that land of opportunity they want to go to, it gives you a negative feeling about your country, your born land. You have a sense of inferiority towards the place where you were born, because your parents don't want to be here. They're always thinking of you. Have some parents who went to the United States Embassy dozens of times, multiple times. They would write to their relatives who live abroad, asking them to send letters of invitation. They would forge documents. They would, in Jamaica, we have a thing we call bandulu. So bandulu is when you do anything illegitimately, right? You forge papers, you grease somebody's palms, you pay some money to some official to give you false documents, You steal people's passport with their visa in it and forge it and put your pic, all kind of things, right? When you see people engage in these things to leave, that's how desperate they are to leave, it automatically makes you as a child feel that this place where you were born is inferior. That's the first thing. It's inferior. So you see yourself as inferior, and then anything that is foreign is superior. So right now, the Caribbean is called the backyard of the United States. And if they sneeze, we catch a cold. Whatever they do, we try to imitate because we have been raised to see them as a superior culture. And now the maladies that are affecting the first world countries now, those maladies are starting to affect us. The crime, the obesity, whether it's health related, violence, crime related, it trickles down to us because we have just been following. We want to imitate because we see them as superior. This has been ingrained in us. I'm telling you, a majority of the kids I grew up with have found themselves in the foreign land. Because that was the goal that was riveted in your mind as the ultimate goal. Get to America, get to Canada, get to England by whatever means. So the children who are left behind, they tend to exhibit behavioral problems. Even though they are better dressed than the other raggedy children running around, they have better sneakers, better uniforms, better bags, better books, better toys. Even though they have these material things, there is a sense of emptiness, there's a sense of longing. So it can lead to depression, it can lead to withdrawal. The child just becomes withdrawn because they don't have that bond. When they see other kids, their birthday come around and you see mommy and daddy, or they're going out with mommy and daddy, Christmas, Easter, all these celebrations, these big holidays, where are their parents, right? So it can make them feel withdrawn, make them want to run away from home. We have a lot of runaway, and all of these are looked at. You can go to the Dr. Crawford Brown's book, and you'll see these issues elaborated on. And this affects not just the generation. It's almost like a generational curse. Second, third, fourth generation impact on the community. Because when these children start developing behavioral problems, it's going to affect the rest of us. When they start becoming depressed, when they start running away and getting involved in gangs and violent crimes, it's going to affect the rest of us. Sexual abuse, physical abuse are very high among these barrel children. Clearly, because they are left by their parents, left in the charge of grandma and grandpa who are barely able to look after themselves, or left in the care of aunties and uncles who might abuse them sexually, and might use them as maids and servants. It is a very high probability that when you leave your child in the care of even a relative, that child will be used as a servant in the household. That's the child who's going to be doing most of the chores. That's the child who's going to be doing the cooking, the washing, the errands, and the other children in the house do little or nothing. I have seen this over and over. When you leave your child, even with relatives, let alone when you leave your child with a neighbor, with a stranger, to raise for you, to look after that child until you get yourself sorted out, which can take donkey years, as we say in Jamaica, donkey years. It can take the entire lifespan of that childhood. I have seen with my own two eyes. These girls especially, the girls suffer the most, but the boys suffer as well. The girls are turned into slaves. They have to do everything, and then the other kids whose parents the household belongs to, them just cock up, as we say in Jamaica, them cock up them 10. And the other child, your child who you left, will do all the chores, all the errands, get the brunt of all the anger, anything that is there to take out on anybody, it will be taken out on your child. Right? Including sexual favors. A lot of these kids are sexually abused, a lot of them. The numbers are astronomical. And you know, we're going to talk about a lot of these issues because you see, child abuse in Jamaica and in other Caribbean countries, and I would want to examine more on the continent itself, but I can speak to what I have seen with my own two eyes. Child abuse is very rampant. Sexual abuse in families is very rampant, and it's something that we cover up, we push it under the carpet, we turn a blind eye, we ignore it, we pretend that it's not happening. Even when we are told, we don't acknowledge it. We think that in not looking in that direction, it will go away. Right? And sometimes these parents, they send the material things, they send the money, and these adults keep the money for themselves. Just a little bit, if any, actually gets to the child. Likewise for the flour and the sugar and the oil and the canned goods, very little might actually get to your child. So in your mind, oh, you're sending this, you're sending that, and it appeases your conscience, and you say, well, I'm not there, but at least me know say I eat, at least me know say she have money to do this, at least me know say her school fee pay, she have got a good school. Are they really? Because some of these adults who you're sending the money to and sending the barrels to, they're keeping it for themselves, and it's not getting to your child anyway. It's not getting to your child anyway. Not even the empty barrel gets to the child, right? So whether you want to leave them with a stranger or a family member or their older siblings who themselves might barely be adults, just barely, they're children themselves, and they're not able to provide the guidance, the protection, the nurturing that you as a parent can provide. Are we saying that no parent should migrate in search of better opportunities? Is that what we're saying? I don't know if that's what we're saying. That would be unfair, wouldn't it, to say that, well, once you're a parent and an opportunity presents itself, you are not to take that opportunity because of the consequences it might have if you have to leave the child. That's something you have to make that decision on your own. That's your personal decision. I can't decide for you. I know for me, I can tell you for Kamau is not going to leave her child. Kamau will not leave her children. to go for any greater opportunity. There's no opportunity to me that is greater than being here to nurture my children and to keep them safe. That's my personal take. Nothing is more important to me. So that decision is made even before the opportunity is given for me. If you can do it and you can put things in place to ensure, and I don't know how you would ensure, but if you feel relatively safe with the person you're leaving your child with, you just have to weigh the scales and see. But I know for me, I would not leave my kids. 3 of them are adults now. 1 is almost an adult. And I made that decision from before they were conceived, that I would be integral in their life. They were homeschooled by me. So, but that's me. Not everyone is able to do that, right? Depending on your situation, depending on your resolve, what are your priorities? I know that was my priority. And I would never, I've seen even in my own family where my grandma raised a lot of her grandkids. My grandma raised a lot of her grandkids. And it's something I look on and I say, I would never put that burden on my mother. And we're going to talk more in depth about that next week when we look at the grandma, today's grandma, and the burden that yesterday's grandma had to bear, not just from her kids, but from her spouse, from the society, the burden that the grandmas of yesterday had to bear. I looked at it and I said, you know what? I would never put that burden on my mom. So I made sure that I was going to be able to stand by my kids and raise them as their mother. That was very important to me. Now, as a teacher, I'm also going to tell you what I have observed in my students, those who were waiting to be filed, those who are waiting for the filing to come through, for them to go to join their parents. That's a phenomenon I've noticed. You see, when a child is waiting to migrate, these barrel children, right? They're waiting to go up. They exhibit certain traits, right? That I've noticed as a teacher. These children in your class, they're going to lack motivation. These barrel children, they lack motivation. They're in a limbo land. They just saunter through life. They're just cruising through life, waiting, anticipating. It's what you'd call suspended animation. They're existing, right? Just constantly waiting, and so they're not committed to their education. Their grades will be low. Sometimes you'll have a child excelling, and once they find out that they're being filed for, once you tell them that they're going to migrate, you just see it's like they cut off, like they sign off from learning. And it's something I've observed, and it's something I've mentioned to others over the years as a teacher. I've been teaching for 20 odd years. They also tend to have a kind of arrogance and condescension. They're very condescending when they're talking to their peers and how they treat their peers, especially when they have these things to brandish, these name brand things that they have to show. They flaunt it. They flaunt the money that their parents sent for them. And they just consign themselves, they resign themselves to just cruising through, just getting by until such time. And when you add that to the fact that there is little or no parental guidance or adult supervision for them, or the adult supervision that is there is not full force parental because, it's not your parent. When you add those things together, you get a child who is going to act out, even if they don't go to full-fledged violence, but they will be a poor student. Right? They will be a poor performing student. That is what I have seen as a teacher in the classroom for so many years. Whenever I encounter one of these barrel children who are in this limbo land waiting to be filed for, these are the tendencies that they have. And like I said, we also have barrel adults. We have barrel adults. And I'm claiming that term today. I'm claiming that term because I have noticed even those who are adults and they're waiting to migrate, somebody over yonder is filing for them. They will have a different way of behaving. They don't try to stabilize themselves to a job. They might be cruising from job to job. They're not committed to advancing themselves educationally while they're here. And in terms of relationships, they might just be playing the field. They're not thinking of marriage because they're waiting until they get over there, right? To find somebody who will be worthy of them when they get over there. So even if they impregnate someone down here, we're thinking of the men now, they're not doing that with any sense of long-term commitment. Very few of them will be thinking that way. Very few of them. And you might have some persons who, when they know that you are waiting to migrate, right? When they know that you are being filed for, they might want to latch on to you as a way of getting that opportunity. Thinking in their minds, okay, you soon gone up. If I can make this connection, if I can get impregnated by you, we can have a child together. That might be my foot in. That might be my way of going abroad. So they are seen as an opportunity, and they know this. They know this, and they use it. They gain leverage from it. They use it to get sexual encounters. And that's all it is for them, is a sexual encounter, because they see themselves now as prime real estate. They see that, and only in the sense of the fact that they will now be living abroad soon, and this soon can take a long time. It can take a mighty long time, and it can take a toll on the psyche. Because when you're in limbo land and you're cruising, you're just living for the sake of today, you're not making any future plans, you might find yourself at a certain age and wondering, what do I have to show for this life? What have I been here doing all this time? And then you see, they're going to get a rude awakening, both the child and the adult. Both the barrel child and the barrel adult is in for a rude awakening when they get to the promised land. Especially the adults. When they get there and realize it's that culture shock. Yes, they want to go experience snow, but once you've experienced the snow for a day, it wears itself out, right? And you realize now you're going to have to wake up and go out in that snow every day to earn your keep. You realize that you can't call in sick as you used to. When you're in the Caribbean, we have this relaxed thing, you know, and time is not a factor for us. And we call in sick or we call in and we're late, and yeah, it's a Caribbean thing. We're more leisurely. And you go to these places and you realize you have to be on time every time or else, right? And you have to put up or get out. So plus you go now to a place where people who look like you are the minority, and the system is set against you in so many ways. You're a minority because of your race. You're also a minority because of the fact that you're coming from a third world country. Most times having to accept the most menial of tasks for the bare minimum wage. And all of this hits you. Some persons are the worst for it, right? Some persons are the worst for it. And for the kids, what I've noticed, a lot of them, when they go up, because our educational system here in the Caribbean is superior to the American system, especially up to high school level. Not beyond that, right? Up to from elementary to high school, our educational system here in Jamaica, I can attest for that, is superior. So when our kids go up there, even the ones who weren't doing so well, they will tend to outshine their counterparts, at least for the time being. Right? But then they will go up there, and because of the culture shock and because of a lot of other factors that are peculiar to the Caribbean immigrant there, they will tend to fall back and they will tend to fall into bad behavior, maybe even violent behavior. It's something I have observed. So, all in all, the impact of the barrel children, at least in the Caribbean, I would want for persons in other parts of the diaspora to let me know if this is even a phenomenon with you. But the impact has been overwhelmingly negative. And I don't know how or what we can put in place to prevent or to alleviate these negative consequences. But I do know that so far, the overwhelming impact has been a negative one. You know, we are going to migrate as humans. We're going to seek greener pastures. We're going to seek opportunity wherever it is. That's a human tendency. But what we have to do, especially where children are involved, we have to think, we have to set our priorities right. And we have to think of the impact our actions are going to have on our posterity, on the children that we bring into the world. So the best thing then is for us to try to put ourselves in a good place before we bring these children into the world. I think that is one of the solutions. The most practical solution, I think, is rather than have the children and then try now to be hustling and bustling to find a way to better the situation for the children, and then use that as a reason or an excuse to abandon them. Rather than that, it's best to seek your opportunities first. Go out and explore the world first. Give yourself a firm footing first. Get yourself established. If foreign is where you want to go, get yourself established there first. And then have the children, the kids. What do you think about that? Is that practical? Does that make sense? I'm thinking that makes better sense. Establish yourself, lay the foundation, get things. I mean, it's not going to be perfect. You're not going to be necessarily exactly where you want to be, but at least get certain things in place. If you know you're foreign minded, don't have a bag of kids in your born land. If you know you're foreign minded and that's where you're heading and that's where you're gonna put your roots down firm, don't have any kids until you get to the foreign land, so that you can have your kids there with you. And you don't have to be you going and have to leave them, because a lot of bad things can happen to them. And most of us, the way our conscience set up, even if at first you're going to try to appease it with sending the barrel, sending the money, sending the brand name things, eventually it's going to come home to you that you put other things before the safety and protection of your child. And that can eat at you. If you have any good conscience at all, it can eat at you. When you come to the realization that your child was molested, sexually abused, physically abused by others to whom you left them in their care, you left this child in the care of this adult or young adult. And as a result of you leaving that child, they suffered abuse. As a result of you leaving that child, they developed emotional deficits, behavioral problems. They are now a menace to society. How good is that for them? Did you really benefit their life in leaving? These are some of the things we have to ask ourselves, and we have to really sit down and decide, is it worth it? Is it worth the sacrifice? Is it worth it? Let us ask ourselves that, and let us, put things in place to stop this from happening. So remember, next week, we're bringing out the grannies. We're going to talk about our grandmas, the modern day grandma, and what she's not putting up with. The foolishness that her sisters in the past put up with, she's not having it. We're going to talk about grandma next week. So I want you to join me then and let me know your thoughts on the barrel children. Remember, we're also going to be looking at the latchkey children. Latchkey children. So that's something we're bearing in mind, and we have a ton of other pertinent, serious, very important topics to discuss, right? So until then, this is Kamau. Thank you for being with me this morning, and I'll see you next week.